We've been talking about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, whose reign coincides with the end of the Pax Romana, and the Stoic philosopher, famous for his book, The Meditations. And we want to focus on something that comes up at the beginning of the Meditations. But before we get there, let's look at a few excerpts from the book. Here's one. Either everything is a confused gathering and scattering of atoms, or else it is all a great unity and design. I place my trust in that which governs all things. Marcus Aurelius he's raising this question that comes up in human affairs from ancient times to the present, and that is there an order in the universe? Is there a force that governs the universe? Is there ultimately sense in the universe? Or is the universe senseless? Is the universe meaningless? Does the universe not have a governor, not have an intelligence presiding over it? And so notice that in ancient times this question was there, and Marcus Aurelius says, well, one possibility is that everything, the universe, everything we experience is a confused gathering and scattering of atoms without meaning, without sense. Or the universe, maybe there's meaning within the universe. Maybe there is a governor presiding over the universe. And Marcus Aurelius chooses, as he says, to place his trust in that which governs all things. So this is a Stoic idea, that there is a reason, right? There is something divine. There is something rational that governs the universe. And the Stoics will say that the human being's job is to align his or her life with that. And so we see that here. Marcus Aurelius effectively says, I choose to believe that there is something reasonable, that there is something rational that governs the universe. Here's another quote. Why am I resentful if I'm going out to do that for which I was born and that for which I was brought into the cosmos? Well, those two, I think, latter phrases there say the same thing, that for which I was born, that for which I was brought into the cosmos. And here's a Stoic idea, that people are born with a purpose. People are born for a reason. That there's a great drama that's playing out. There's the great theater of the universe, and the stage is planet Earth. And each person has been given a role to play. Now that person has a job, and that job is to figure out what that role is. And when I figure out what role I have to play in life, and of course there will be, maybe perhaps a major role and then other roles. When I figure out what roles I have to play in life, then I need to play those roles as well as I can. So this is a Stoic idea. And Stoicism is not passive. Remember, in a previous discussion we said that the word apatheia, the English word apathy, this is associated with the Stoics, but for the Stoics that doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean being passive. When it comes to my life's work, when it comes to my mission, when it comes to my task of aligning myself with the divine in the universe, then I need to be very diligent about that. I need to work very hard. I need to know what I'm for, and then I need to get busy working at that and making my contribution in the world. So this is not a passive philosophy in some respects. Remember, Marcus Aurelius says, look, you can control yourself, so work at that. So that's not passive. You can't control what other people think. You can't control what other people do. You might try to influence that, but ultimately you can't control that. And so in that respect, then, you let go. And perhaps there's something a little passive there. But when it comes to my own life, when it comes to pursuing what I should be pursuing, then there's no passivity at all. Now, the point Marcus Aurelius is getting at here is I was born for something. I was brought into the cosmos for doing something, and therefore I need to do that. There's a sense of duty. There's a sense of obligation. Why was I born? For what purpose was I brought into the universe? Okay, I need to be busy doing that. And then he says, now why am I resentful if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Right? So in Stoic philosophy, there's also a strong sense of duty, a sense of obligation. What am I for? What are my obligations? What should I be doing? Now, in the course of that work, Marcus Aurelius is suggesting here, maybe I feel resentful because it's not appreciated. Maybe I feel resentful because it's not recognized. Maybe I feel resentful because I'm not thanked for what I'm doing. And the Stoic idea is, and we've discussed this in a previous discussion, don't let your sense of self be determined by what other people think, by what other people do, because you can't control that, right? Of course it's nice to be thanked. Of course it's nice to be appreciated, and we want to do that. We want to thank people. We want to appreciate people, but not everyone will do that. My job is not to go around collecting the thanks and appreciation of other people. My job is to do what I'm supposed to do in this world. That's a very Stoic idea. And so we see that here in Marcus Aurelius. Here's the third idea. When you have done a good act and another has fared well by it, why seek a third reward besides these, as fools do, be it the reputation for having done a good act or getting something in return? So if you do something good that's helpful to someone else, Marcus Aurelius suggests, then there are two goods that you've already produced. There are two rewards, to use that word, that you've already produced. First, by doing something good, you've done something good for yourself. You do something good for someone else, and in the process of doing that, you've done something good for yourself. You have trained yourself to be, or you have practiced being the kind of person who does good, helpful things for other people. All right? And this fits very well with Aristotle's idea. How does a person become truthful? And you might remember Aristotle's response. A person becomes truthful the same way that a person becomes a good piano player, by practicing. Right? And so when we practice truthfulness, then we're benefiting ourselves because we're shaping our character. We're making ourselves truthful. When we spend time helping somebody with something, when we do a favor for someone, whether they know it or not, we've done something that's benefited them, and that's good for them. So that's one reward, the good that the other person receives. But we've also done good for ourselves. There's kind of a phrase would be enlightened self-interest, right? So do I want to be the kind of person who does good and helpful things for other people? I do. Okay, well, it's in my interest to be that kind of person. So I should practice that kind of thing. And when I practice that kind of thing, then not only do I help someone else, but I reward myself in the process by doing that kind of thing. So I hope that makes sense. So Marcus Aurelius says, in doing things that are helpful and useful to other people, then you have produced two rewards, to use that word. You have produced two goods. So why do you look for a third thing? The third thing might be recognition. Again, this is kind of like the previous point we're making. Oh, I did something good, helpful for someone else. It was good and helpful to that person. It was good for me to do it. But now I'm kind of upset because I didn't get a thank you, because I didn't get recognition, I didn't get noticed, right? Here's that sense of duty again. Do helpful things to other people because that's what the logos requires. To use that phrase, to use that term logos, which we bring up a lot in this course. Do that kind of thing because that's what the will of the divine is, right? And if you do that, then you've helped another person, you've helped yourself, and if you don't get the word of thanks, if you don't get the appreciation, that third reward, if you don't get that third goodie, just let it go. Do what you're supposed to do. Be the kind of person you're supposed to be. So these are some, standard Stoic ideas that I think are pretty useful, pretty helpful. Very difficult to put into practice. Very easy to say, difficult to put into practice because we want to be thanked, we want to be noticed, we want to be appreciated. But the Stoic idea is we need to do what we're supposed to do and let it go with that because we can't control how other people respond. Okay, well, let's go back to the very beginning of the book. And Marcus Aurelius begins his book by actually reflecting on people who helped shape who he was. Now, Marcus Aurelius is aware of his flaws. He's aware of his flaws. He's aware that he's not perfect, and we see that reflected in this book. He kind of critiques himself and says, I need to do better at this and that thing. But Marcus Aurelius, I think, also looks at himself, he observes himself, and he sees a person who is pretty well disciplined. He sees a person who can be trusted. He sees a person of integrity. And so he's wondering, where did I learn these things? Who taught me these valuable things? So, for example, from my grandfather Verus, I learned good morals and the government of my temper. So, control of temper, that's a really good quality for a person to have. And Marcus Aurelius says, I've got my problems, but there's some things I'm pretty good at. One of the things I'm pretty good at is controlling my temper. Who more than any other single person, who taught me that? Oh, my grandfather Verus. From my mother, I learned piety. Remember that Roman virtue that we discussed a few times back? Pietas, right? Commitment to country, commitment to empire, commitment to family, commitment to the gods, right? So from my mother, I learned piety and beneficence. That is, givingness, giving to other people. And abstinence not only from evil deeds, but from evil thoughts. Controlling not just actions, but controlling the mind, right? When those warped thoughts begin to take shape, batting them down, putting them away. Who taught me this sort of thing? Well, my mom taught me this kind of thing. From my tutor, I learned, so my school teacher basically, I learned not to meddle with other people's affairs. Right? Remember, I'm remembering the negative confession that we looked at from ancient Egypt. And remember the negative confession, one of the things you have to say as you're going through judgment is, I have not been an eavesdropper. I have not stuck my nose into other people's affairs, right? That's my translation of that. I have not been an eavesdropper. I haven't, dug my nose into other people's business. And so Marcus Aurelius points to that here. He says, from my tutor, my teacher, I learned not to meddle in other people's affairs, not to be ready to listen to slander, not only not to slander other people, that is, not to unnecessarily tear down other people, but I learned not to listen to slander. I don't want to listen to that kind of talk, that unnecessary ripping down of other people. Okay? Now, we've got to make judgment calls. Of course, in conversation, there's light talk and, there's goodwill, joking and jibing and things like that. What Marcus Aurelius here, I think, is talking about when he used that word slander is used, is, just really going after other people, ripping them down unfairly in a cruel and critical and unhelpful kind of way. And I think all of us are guilty of this from time to time. We want to control that, right? And Marcus Aurelius, seems to have gotten pretty good at it. And he says, well, who did I learn that from? Well, more than any other single person, from my teacher. From Diognetus, I learned not to busy myself about trifling things, right? And this gets back to an idea we discussed in the previous discussion. The Stoics really emphasize this point of time. Time is always going by. Time is always slipping away. Every minute that goes by is gone. You can't get it back. Make the most of our lives, right? Therefore, don't be focused and don't spend your time on trifling things. That is, on unimportant things, on things that don't matter. That's not to say don't take a break. Of course, we have to take a break, right? But as we've said before, there's a difference between useful leisure and wasting time. So from Diognetus, Marcus Aurelius says, I learned to not busy myself with things that really don't matter. Right? From Maximus, I learned self-government, self-control, discipline, not to be led aside by anything. In other words, focus. I learned how to focus, right? So I go through my mental files, who most helped me with this? Well, in one, in relation to one thing, it was grandpa. In relation to something else, it was mom. In relation to something else, it was my teacher. In relation to something else, it was Diognetus. In relation to self-government, focus, Maximus, I think. In my father, Marcus Aurelius says, I observed mildness of temper and unchangeable resolution in the things which he had determined after due deliberation, right? So mildness of temper, there's that, So he talks about, controlling his temper in a previous quote that we looked at. And here he says, in my father, I observed mildness of temper. And so that's a kind of teaching. And then he says, and from my father I observed unchangeable resolution in things which he had determined after due deliberation. So I watched my father deliberate, and you deliberate, you're thinking, what should I do and how should I do it? What should I do and how should I do it? That's deliberation. So he watched his dad deliberate, and then he saw once his dad makes a decision, then his dad perseveres and sticks to it, right? Sticks to the plan, sticks to the project. So that's a pretty important life skill. And so Marcus Aurelius picked that up from his dad. Now these are just a few things. It goes on for several pages where Marcus Aurelius refers to different people who influenced him in different ways. And I thought about this, and this is something that we can do ourselves. Now, of course, if we're pretty early on in life, and we're looking mostly ahead, and we're in the process of growing up and, getting our basic education, then our thinking, about these kinds of things, probably isn't going to be very well shaped just because we don't have a whole lot of life behind us. But we want to begin thinking about this kind of thing. First of all, what kind of life should I aspire to have? What are the moral skills? What are the life skills that I should have if I want to have a good, meaningful, fulfilling, purposeful life? And then who is helping me along the way? Who is helping me along the way? Now, in the case of a person my age now, in my mid-50s, I'm looking ahead a bit, but I'm looking, I'm also spending more time now looking back because there's more life behind me than there is ahead of me now, probably. And so when I read Marcus Aurelius, I think, as I reflect on sort of the kinds of qualities I have, kinds of the different focuses I have, who had the influence on me? And Marcus Aurelius says, Maximus had influence on me, Diognetus had influence on me, my tutor had influence on me, mom and dad, grandpa had influence on me, many others had influence on me. And so I put together a list, and I thought, what are some of the characteristics that I have? So, I understand people aren't interested in hearing all these things about me, but what we saw is that Marcus Aurelius begins his meditations thinking about, to whom do I owe thanks for helping me with these things in my life, right? These things that I think on the whole are good, right? Now, we've all got our problems and our issues. We need to work on those. So Marcus Aurelius sees that as well. He's not presenting himself as a perfect person, but he's looking at himself and saying, I'm not perfect. I've got my problems, but, I think I do have certain strengths. And who helped me develop those strengths? And as I was thinking about what Marcus Aurelius did, then I went through this thought process myself. And here's the key idea: the importance of recognizing the contributions that others make to our lives. The importance of recognizing the contributions, the positive contributions that others make to our lives. And then I would add to that, letting them know. I assume that some of these people that Marcus Aurelius mentions were no longer alive when he wrote it down, but some probably were. The importance of that, recognizing first of all, who are the people who helped to shape me? For young people, who are the people who are currently helping me? Who is trying to help me to develop into the best possible person I can be? And how are they helping me? They're helping me in different ways. They're bringing different gifts. They're bringing different interests. They're bringing different ideas. Who is helping me? Right? Being aware of that. And then, remember, Marcus Aurelius says the people who are doing that should not base their work on getting thanks. They should not base their works on getting appreciation. They should do what they do because that's their mission in life. But we recognize it's important to express thanks. It's important to express appreciation. So let's just think about that. Who, for those of us who are young, who is trying to help us along the way so that 20, 30, 40 years from now, we can look back and, like Marcus Aurelius, we can write out things, this person helped me with this, and this person helped me with that, and this person helped me with that, right? Who is at this moment helping us? Those of us who are older, as we look back, who helped us along the way. I think this is a really useful thing to do. So I'm glad that Marcus Aurelius started his book with that.